Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the True Purpose of Life. Today we are going to explain Revelation chapter 6, verse 5 and 6. I have mentioned time after time, this is not just a matter of head knowledge, but is to help you to see how much involved you as a person are when it comes to the horses and the riders of the book of Revelation, how this affect us individually, since we have been living in the last days of this system of things from 1914 CE until Armageddon, and also during the Lord's Day from 1914 CE until the final test, 1,000 years after Armageddon. Now, when it comes to the black horse, number one, the horse is black. Usually blackness does not symbolize something that has to do with happiness and brightness, something pure, because if you try to spoil the color black, you will not see much spoiled there because the color hides it. But when it came to the black, to the white horse, is unblemished because anything would be visible to it. That's why the book of Revelation symbolizes the third rider on the black horse, not on any other color, because each color has a symbolic meaning. Now, in the top of the rider of the black horse has a pair of scales in his hands. Now, what do scales symbolize? So we have to weight everything. Means that there is no abundance. There is everything measured, because of the sparingly. Everything is so sparing that it has to be measured as a ration. And the rider seemed to be very skinny because he's starving at some point, depicted here in the picture. However, let's see when Jesus opened the third seal, because as we mentioned, the book of Revelation, to this seal, to this scroll, are seven seals, and only Jesus had the authority to do so. No one else, because all authority has been given only to him on the heavens and on the earth, in starting from the year 33 CE. And now John says in verse 5, let's read the first part of verse 5. And when he opened the third seal, Jesus opened the third seal, I, John, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." Now, what is the third living creature? Who is the third living creature here? Now, we mentioned that the first one is with the face of lion, which symbolizes righteous and justified courage for doing what is right. The second one has the face of a bull, which symbolizes power, and the third one has the face of a human man, and the fourth has the face of an eagle. Now, this cherub that has a face of a man, like man, depicts the quality of love. Principled love will abound in God's new world, right after Armageddon, even as that fine quality permeates all of Jehovah's organization today. At that time, the whole world's population will be dominated by the most powerful quality ever, love. Now let's see 1 John chapter 4 verse 16. 1 John chapter 4 verse 16. 1 John is after 2 Peter. Chapter 4 verse 16, it says, "And we have come to know and believe the love that God has for us. And God is love. The one who remains in love remains in union with God, and God remains in union with him." So is no unity without love. So when John said, we have come to know and believe that God has the love that God has for us, what he was talking about. In the Gospel of John, chapter 3, verse 16, it says, "For God loved the world so much that he gave his only begotten Son, who is Jesus Christ, so that everyone exercising faith in him might not be destroyed but have everlasting life." Number one, everyone that exercises faith in him. So without faith, right, will not come to know Jehovah and Christ. And when we have faith and exercise faith through our actions, we will not be destroyed, John said, but will have everlasting life, which is mentioned in the Holy Scriptures 40 times. Now, but all this is connected under the powerful compound of love. We can be sure that the rider of the white horse, who must rule as king until God has put all his enemies under his feet, including death, will lovingly remove the calamitous situation that is next brought to John's scrutiny. So let's see this in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, 25. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 25. The whole chapter 15 speaks about the resurrection and living forever, but more for resurrection. In verse 15 of chapter in verse 25 of chapter 15, it says, "For he must rule as king." Who must rule as king? Jesus Christ. Until when? Until God has put all enemies under his feet. So Jehovah had subdued all his enemies and Jesus' enemies under Jesus' feet. And says here, one second, let's clarify this point. If we go to Psalm 110, 1-2 says, "Jehovah declared to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I place your enemies as a stool for your feet. Jehovah will extend the scepter of your power out of Zion, saying, go, subduing in the midst of your enemies." Now, who is the last enemy? The last enemy is death. So now Jehovah is going to eliminate death forever. So there is no longer going to be death. Death will never exist. Jehovah is going to get rid of this powerful enemy, which started with Adam and Eve. So Adam brought death because of his disobedience, and Christ is bringing us back everlasting life, what Adam lost. Adam lived 930 years and could not reach 1,000 because he lost perfection. He missed the mark of perfection. And Jehovah is going to bring us back through Christ everlasting life, what Adam lost. So death is going to be eliminated once for all time. We are conditioned with death for over 6,500 years. People are born, grow old, get sick and die. Are born, grow old, get sick and die. Are born, grow old, get sick and die. And we are conditioned now in this concept, and for us to change this concept and to believe that everlasting life and living forever in this beautiful planet is a reality that is not easy unless we come to an accurate knowledge of the scriptures. But anyhow, now we are here that all the enemies will be subjected under Jesus' feet. So let's go now with the black horse and its rider, what they are going to do. And I saw the second part of verse 6 of Revelation, of verse 5, chapter 6, verse 5 of Revelation says, "And I saw, and look, a black horse, and the one seated upon it had a pair of scales in his hands." As we mentioned, scales, right? Rationality of food, ration of food. Stark famine. That is the dirt. That is a dire message of this prophetic scene. It points forward to situations earlier in the Lord's day when food must be rationed out by scales, right? So since 1914 CE, famine, right, has been a continuing worldwide problem. Modern warfare brings famine in its wake. For resources normally used in feeding the hungry are often diverted to supplying war weapons. Farm workers are conscripted, and battle scared or scarred fields and scorched earth. Policies curtail food production. Now we see this in Russia and Ukraine. They both are sources of grain, of wheat. For Africa, when the war started, many countries in Africa are struggling. They are in famine because of the war that took place this year in 2022. So now, how true this was during the First World War as well, when millions suffered from hunger and died. Moreover, the rider of the black horse of hunger, so the rider of the black horse symbolized hunger with the scales in his hands, did not relent with the end of the war. During the 1930s, what Stalin did to the poor Ukrainians, he was a criminal, right? He caused 5 million Ukrainians to die by famine. The Second World War brought in its wake more food shortages and famines, right? We have the statistics of the countries that were affected by the Second World War when it comes to famine. As the black horse continues its gallop, the World Food Council reported in mid-1980s that 512 million humans were starving and that 40,000 children die of hunger or hunger-related causes every day. Now, John tells us more in verse 6 by saying, "And I heard a voice as if in the midst of the four living creatures say, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the olive oil and the wine." Now, a Roman soldier, when John wrote the book of Revelation 96e, because before I said 98, I made a mistake in the previous video. In my mind was 98, but 96, but I said 98. So what's happened? He had the ration of a quart of wheat, right? But a quart of wheat during Jesus' times, 70 years earlier than before John died or wrote the book of Revelation, was a day of a labor. The full day was incredible. It was very expensive. A quart of wheat. And says here, as I mentioned, a quart of wheat for a denarius and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. So barley was considered inferior food in comparison with wheat. And do not harm the olive oil and the wine. So olive oil and wine feel here like they are luxuries in food, but they are not. They were common commodities used during that time. So all four cherubs are united here in expressing a need to watch food supplies carefully, just as the people had to eat bread by weight and in anxious care prior to Jerusalem destruction, 607 BC. Not only in Jerusalem destruction, but when the city was surrounded, even at the time of Assyrians, when during the Sennacherib military forces that surrounded Jerusalem at the time, women were eating their own children. So it was a ration of food in those days, and how much more during the destruction of Jerusalem when 95 Jews died within the city. But when it comes to our time, as we mentioned, we have 40,000 children, even more today, because that statistic was mid-80s. 40,000 children die every day because of famine and malnutrition. Today, they might be double of that. But still today we are living during the Lord's Day, or the signs of the time, of the last days of the system of things that is going to be destroyed in Armageddon. So the rider of the black horse is whipping, is causing so much famine all over. Are some families in the world that they eat just one ration a day. They have no money, they have not much food. We are in Western countries here. It's much easier for us, but depends where you are. Famine is everywhere, despite the fact that some countries, like in Western and capitalist countries, like United States and Canada and Germany and Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, they don't feel it much, but the rest of the world feels it beyond compare, beyond our understanding, how much people suffer and are trying to make against meat. As I mentioned here, let's see Matthew chapter 20 verse 2. I want to see this scripture. Matthew, remind me something. Matthew chapter 20 verse 2. Matthew chapter 20 verse 2. It says, after he had agreed with the workers for a denarius a day, which is the quart of wheat, he sent them into his vineyard. Right? So that was the deal that the man, a rich man, made with his workers. Now, was the whole day of work, 12 hours, whatever it was a denarius, quart of wheat. Now that was the ration of the whole family. Now if a family, this quart of wheat could serve a small family, could not serve a family. Sorry, it was just the ration of a soldier, but 3 quarts of barley, unpolished barley, was going to serve still a small family. So a quart was not that much ration, was a very limited one for a human to eat in those days. Now, what is implied by the statement, do not harm the olive oil and the wine? Some have viewed it as meaning that while many would be short of food and even starving, the luxuries of the rich would not be harmed. That's how some people view it. But in the Middle East, oil and wine, as I mentioned, are not really luxuries. In Bible times, bread, oil, and wine were viewed as staples or necessities. So let's see that in how true it is. Let's see that in Genesis chapter 14, verse 18. Genesis, the first book of the Bible, chapter 14 and verse 18. It says, "And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of the Most High God." What he brought in to Abraham, in front of Abraham, he brought bread and wine. Means that normal food, common food, was not luxurious, something rare. Was common food. Let's sit down and eat a piece of bread. That was the expression in those days. Let's see Psalms 104. Let's go to the book of Psalms. Chapter 104. Come on. And verse 14 and 15. It says, "He is making grass grow for the cattle and vegetation for mankind's use, to grow food from the land." And 15, "And wine that makes man's heart rejoice, oil that makes the face shine, and bread that sustains the heart of mortal man." So these are common foods for humans, are not luxuries. But now the extreme is going to take place, as the black horse and its rider is going to take these necessities, right? These staples from humans. So humans are not going to have the possibility to have these common foods anymore. So they will starve. Before Armageddon, things are going to go from bad to worse. And we see this with inflation now, and things are going downhill no matter what governments try to do. There are many things that are out of their hands, the way how things go, because the black horse and its rider are reaping, how to say it, are causing so much turmoil and emotional distress and anxieties and fears in world's population. In time, things will get to an extreme point that men will kill for bread. They will kill each other for bread. They will not dominate anymore. They will just kill. Violence and so many bad things are going to take place, because when people have no peace and they are under distress and emotional pain, they don't care if they die, because they feel that they have nothing to lose. Now, anyhow, these are signs of the time. Water was not always good, so wine was widely used for drinking and sometimes for medicinal purposes. So today we have great water resources that they are filtered, are clean, and still when the water reaches our apartment, our house, we have filters again to make sure that we have a filtered water. But in those days, water was not always good, so was many times was polluted by algae and things like this, and people could get sick, could get stomach pain. And so instead of drinking water, people used to drink wine. So if wine would be so rare, people would not have this they would be totally in trouble. But But very soon, the rider of the black horse will stop even wine, so will not. So if, actually today for buying a glass of a bottle of wine sometimes is $30-40. Things are going up and not everybody can afford a wine, that's true. But when it comes to bread especially, this is going to be viewed as luxurious because they will not have food as they used to have in the past. Even in Western countries, things are going to get very tough. Anyhow, um, uh, when it comes to oil, we can bring oil a little bit here. In Elijah's days, the widow of Zarephath, poor as she was, still had some oil left with which to cook her remaining flour. So even oil was common, like wine and like bread. So the command, do not harm the olive oil and the wine, appears to be advised not to use up the basic commodities too quickly, but to be sparing in their use. So when especially young ones, they get carried away, they feel that they have a good job and they are having a great income, we might say for a short period of time or for a few years, and they think that this condition is going to last and they will always have money, but unsuspectingly they lose the job and they are left in a lurch because they were not wise enough to save money. Now is the time that calls for us to save money, to hold on to money, because if we are loose with our money, we might be left like a duck with no water. So the Bible calls, especially now before Armageddon, says that do not harm the olive oil and the wine, means that save your money and don't waste them. Now, what's the hope we have? We have a great hope. What hope? We are happy, first of all, that the rider of the white horse, Jesus Christ, will soon reign in that gallop of the black horse. For it is written concerning his loving provision for the new world. In his days, Psalm chapter 72, 7 and 16 says, the righteous one will sprout and the abundance of peace until the moon is no more. The moon is always going to be there. We are always going to be there. There will come to be plenty of grain on the earth. On top of the mountains there will be an overflow. So we have a beautiful future. So Jehovah is going to make the wheat, the grains, to grow in top of the mountain. So is no more black horse and its rider. Christ will eliminate the black horse, the same as the red horse, and the same as the pale horse, and death on top of it as the last enemy. So the righteous will possess the earth, the obedient mankind will be on the earth forever and ever, until the moon and the sun is no more. Symbolically speaking, the moon will always be there, the sun will always be there. So we will always be here on this beautiful planet, and this planet is going to give us in abundance food, or food in abundance. So we'll never starve again, because these three bad horses, the red, the black, and the pale, will no longer exist. Next time we are going to understand the pale horse in detail, the same as we are explaining the black horse. Now let's look to the last scripture, the book of Isaiah chapter 25. Let's see another hope that the Bible, the Holy Scriptures give to us. Isaiah chapter 25, verse 6 to 8. It says, "In this mountain Jehovah of armies will make for all the peoples a banquet of rich dishes," symbolically speaking, as if Jehovah is sitting down and eating with us. "A banquet of fine wine, of rich dishes filled with marrow, of fine filtered wine. In this mountain he will do away with the shroud that is enveloping all the peoples, and the covering that is woven over all the nations." So when it says "in this mountain," means that God's heavenly kingdom government, because God's heavenly kingdom government is symbolized as Mount Zion or New Jerusalem. It has all kinds of symbols. He will swallow up death forever. We mentioned that death is going to be swallowed up forever. It's no longer going to be death. You can look to your own Bible of Isaiah chapter 25 verse 8. "And the sovereign Lord Jehovah will wipe away the tears from all faces. The reproach of his people he will take away from all the earth." Not the heaven, because the heaven is clean now, but the earth is still unclean because of Satan the devil, his demons, and this wicked present human society or people. "For Jehovah himself has spoken it." So Jehovah never lies. Right? So we have beautiful hope for the future, and next time we are going to understand the pale horse and its rider. I hope you enjoyed it, and you have much to think about. Thank you.